All right, I think we're ready to hit the ground running. I know we're a minute past scheduled start. I mean, I want to be mindful of everyone's time with us today. So I think we can hit the ground running. For anyone that happens to be joining late, we should be able to provide a recording of this webinar in its entirety shortly afterwards. That speaking as well, I think this is the traditional slide where we inform folks that this webinar will be recorded. There's a potential that your name or other information might be shared as a part of this recording. If you are not okay with that, please feel free to disconnect now. Let us know, and we will make sure to reach out with you and schedule a one-on-one briefing without that potential recording caveat in place. So that being said, my name is Justin Coble. I'm joined by my colleague in green, off to my left and my right, depending on your team's view, Tim Humphrey. We're both modern work solution architects here at Kaizen. I happen to be more on the collaboration side, Tim more on the security compliance side. But we'll be talking through with everyone today the Microsoft Copilot from Microsoft 365 readiness and enablement. Thank you again for joining. Today's agenda, I think, as everyone probably saw in the meetings, post webinars, what have you, we're going to discuss briefly the promise of humans and AI. This is essentially the why. Why is Copilot from Microsoft 365 such an exciting thing? Why are organizations looking to make this investment? And how could this potentially work? We'll do a brief overview of all of the various Copilots as they relate to Microsoft 365. We'll segue over to Tim briefly. He'll discuss with us some of the data preparations from the Copilot from Microsoft 365 side, and then we'll circle back and cover some of the other Copilot requirements for basically how we typically see the journey towards a Copilot enablement of your users taking place. I believe everyone that's joined with this live should see within Teams up top there is a Q&A panel. Please feel free to make use of that because this is configured as a webinar. I don't think individuals will be able to come off mute, at least automatically. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that might be, type them into the Q&A. We'll take a look at them. We have some colleagues here that will not be speaking the whole time, helping us make sure that we get to those questions towards the end as we think of it. So many folks here have probably, especially if you've been on LinkedIn the past few months, have become all too aware of the promise of the humans and AI story. Long story short, when we talked AI several years ago, I mean, heck, even 2 years ago, we were talking about things like machine learning and essentially AI models that had to be trained and trained and trained for potentially months worth of investment. Over the past really 12 months, I think we all saw ChatGPT turned one. Just 4 or 5 days ago, the landscape for generative AI has absolutely completely changed the way that many of us work. We've seen AI win art contests due to much controversy. We've seen AI both be able to recognize and repeat human language in manners that candidly I didn't even think were going to be possible 2 or 3 years ago. And now they're here and they're available to us all day, every day. That affects things not only like many of the early adoption users for generative AI, the traditional developers or IT folks that might have been using ChatGPT or even earlier models earlier on, but really it's kind of changed the way that the world has started working over the past few years. You see, for example, Facebook, which I remember when it first came out years and years ago, it was revolutionary, right? We thought, and we knew that Facebook was going to change the world, and it kind of did. Facebook took 4.5 years to get to 100 million active users. ChatGPT took less than 3 months, and that number keeps on climbing up. Similarly, when we start looking at productivity impacts, we can see, for example, a lot of items along this chart on the right-hand side about basically GDP growth multipliers by century. Right now, we're on track to look at 20x GDP growth over this next century, and a large portion of that can be enabled by things like machine learning, transition towards cloud, of course, now the adoption of AI and AI-related technologies. What's happening, though, is on the same hand of all of this awesome transformative AI technology is organizations that are just overcome by what we refer to generically as digital debt. 64% of employees, when surveys last by Gartner and Forrester for the Microsoft Work Trend Index that was released back in March of this year, reported that they don't have enough time or energy to do their job. 50% of employees report that they spend 57% of employees' time, pardon me, is spent communicating, doing things like writing emails, typing up Teams messages, what have you, rather than potentially what their day job might actually be required to do. And then a very small portion of employees' time is spent towards actually creating or being, or basically in what most folks probably envision their day job being, of creating assets. How can we potentially use AI to help offset this? So introducing Microsoft or Copilot for Microsoft 365. Just a quick pause right here real quick. Most folks probably saw just the other week Microsoft rebranded. It used to be called Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's now been called Copilot for Microsoft 365. All of us have been in the Microsoft ecosystem for a while now. Probably understand that Microsoft changes product names somewhat frequently. If I ever accidentally slip up and say Microsoft 365 Copilot, I mean what's on screen here. Copilot for Microsoft 365. Old habits die hard. Copilot for Microsoft 365, though, is here to help us bring AI to make our humans better. You'll notice that Microsoft was very intentional in the name Copilot. It's not named Autopilot. It's not named after a person. It's designed to be a Copilot for humans. One of the guiding principles for Microsoft for Copilot for Microsoft 365 is the responsible AI standard and AI principles, of which one of the key items is we don't allow for AI to do actions for users. You'll notice in Copilot, for example, I can't tell Copilot, write an email to Tim and tell him about the webinar today. I can instead start writing up an email. I can ask Copilot to write and draft an email for me to Tim. I can tell how long to make it, how professional to make it perhaps, but I am, as a human, the one responsible for prompting Copilot as well as reviewing the outputs from Copilot and hitting the send button. If someone tells you, oh, sorry, I sent a nasty email to you because Copilot wrote it for me, they probably aren't being forthright with you with how that happened, right? Similarly, though, Copilot from Microsoft 365, it's grounded in your business data. What we mean by that is Copilot from Microsoft 365, as we'll see on subsequent slides, has access to the data and the security, compliance, and privacy controls that your organization has put in place around that data. So that way it's able to know a lot more about your organization than perhaps the users interacting with it would do. But on the same hand, it also leverages the existing security boundaries in place, where if a user doesn't have access to it today in SharePoint and OneDrive and emails and Teams chats, whatever it might be, it's not going to show up in that user's Copilot results. Because of that, ultimately users are always in control of what Copilot's doing, how to use it, when to accept something, when to perhaps discard and try again. And likewise, it's also designed to help us pick up on new skills, right? So essentially, I mean, Copilot's been GA for exactly 35 days now, I think it is. We've already seen Copilot pick up additional skills, both from a global perspective, but likewise, as Copilot learns more and more about your organization and the way users are interacting with it, it's going to continue evolving as a product within the organization. So I really wish I had a name I can credit to this diagram because I love it. As of at least 2 or 3 days ago, on formerly known as Twitter, folks were still searching for the person who originated this diagram a few weeks ago. If anyone happens to be able to find that out, please let us know because I want to make sure we can name drop them. At Ignite, earlier in November of 2023, we have 80 plus Copilot-enabled products within the Microsoft Copilot suite. That goes from things like Windows 11 or Windows 10, Visual Studio, GitHub, Power Platform, Microsoft Edge, Fabric, Azure, you name it. If Microsoft is investing in, chances are it has some flavor of Copilot invested within it over the past few months, or is on the roadmap to pick it up in the next few months. That being said, for the rest of today's discussion, we're really going to be laser focused in on Copilot from Microsoft 365 and some of its analogous Copilot solutions up in the browser interface up here. And what used to be known as Bing Chat for Enterprise now, again, has been just rebranded as Microsoft Copilot within Edge. So ultimately, a lot of Copilots, if you have any questions about any of them, please reach out to us at Kaizen, reach out to your Microsoft team. We'd love to discuss them, but because we don't want to try to cover all 95 of these things over the next 30 minutes or so, let's drill into the modern work Copilot and see exactly what this means. Again, Copilot is designed with your existing organization's investment in Microsoft 365 already in mind. What that means is, for example, users are probably today already using Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Microsoft Teams, what have you. Copilot is available directly within those products. Copilot likewise is based off of your tenant's data. There's this thing that many of us have been aware of within Microsoft 365 for quite a while now, referred to as the graph. Simply put, the graph is where search works. It's where all of our information that occurs within Microsoft 365 is stored. Copilot is built with Microsoft Graph in mind, based off of your organization's model, Microsoft's investment in OpenAI and the OpenAI toolchain behind the scenes, and essentially it's designed to bring the full AI suite directly to your users and the products that they already use, using your organization's existing data, and of course the security and compliance around that data. And Tim will be speaking a lot more with us about the security and compliance story here in a few minutes. So we keep on talking about copilots and how many of them there are. Here's a few more. For those of y'all who haven't had the ability to begin playing with Copilot yet, go to bing.com. You'll notice up at the very top, there's a chat interface. You can interact with Copilot today. You can even do so right now in the webinar. I can't see you. I won't be offended if you open up Bing right now and trying it out. This is Microsoft's AI assistant for you, brought to you through the experience of Bing. Likewise, if you happen using Microsoft Edge as your desktop browser, there's probably a Copilot button in the top right-hand corner of your browser just by default. That's not the focus for today. The reason being is because this is the personal Bing chat experience that's available to the whole world. It has no idea if you're from Kaizen, if you're from Microsoft, if you're from Contoso. It's basically Microsoft's Chat GPT, right? It's an amazing tool. I use it all the time when I'm asking, for example, what's the appropriate temperature to cook a turkey to the other week. As potentially where I go to where I ask what's the history of the product name it's into and how many times has its name changed over the past few years. That's what the personal Copilot experience is for within Bing. Any organization that has invested in Microsoft 365 Business Standard, Business Premium, E3, or E5 has built in Copilots within their existing experience today, unless, of course, the organization has perhaps not deployed them yet. Or, for example, in Windows 10 and Windows 11, we have the ability to use Copilot locally to, for example, say, change my screensaver timeout, reset my password, what have you, and those Windows devices will be able to actually walk you through the experience. Similarly, we can engage in this Copilot experience through Edge and desktop and mobile. The big difference between this Copilot from Microsoft 365 and the Bing Chat Copilot is the Microsoft 365 Copilot is based off of your organization's tenant boundaries. Your data will never leave your tenant. It's not used to train the AI model. It's not like it's not going out to Microsoft Cloud, staying within your tenant, right? Users have access to this, as I said, with the existing Microsoft 365 E3 and E5 license entitlement, at least in most clouds. It's not available in all clouds today. And of course, then we get into the most exciting Copilot, I think, at least from my perspective, the Copilot from Microsoft 365 and all those other Copilots around that grid there. For example, if you happen to have this enabled within your tenancy, this is the Copilot formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise. All you have to do, go into Edge, you click that little Copilot icon right there in the top right-hand corner. You'll probably have a Bing Chat or Bing Chat-like logo that shows up for you, and you now have the ability to begin integrating with Copilot. The big thing to be aware of with this version of Copilot is this Copilot does not have access to your organization's graph. So for example, right here, when I am interacting with my Bing Chat Copilot here at Kaizen, and I ask it, about kaizen.sharepoint.com, you'll see Copilot says, I know Kaizen is a Microsoft consulting company. I see that they can do SharePoint based off of results on kaizen.com. This Copilot does not have access to your organization's data. Again, queries sent to this Copilot stay within your tenant. They are closely guarded. Microsoft treats them with the same level of security and sensitivity as they do Teams chats, for example. But this does not include data from your graph. There are very few reasons why organizations could not begin using this version of Copilot today, assuming, of course, your licensing is configured for it right now, because it's secure. It's never fed back to Microsoft. This is the starter Copilot that we could begin leveraging today. However, Copilot from Microsoft 365 really lets us kick this up a notch, and it's where we're going to be spending most of our time for the rest of today. Copilot from Microsoft 365 lets us create material. It lets us unlock productivity by saving time. It lets us up-level skills by learning things we didn't even know. And it does that by, again, leveraging our organization's existing investment in Microsoft 365 and content stored within the graph to enable us to not only take that traditional LLM experience where we can ask it questions and it writes its answers, but to actually ground it in content stored within our graph. So for example, you see I've toggled in this case right here, my chat experience over to the M365 chat experience. Now when I ask it about kaizen.sharepoint.com, it pulls down for me the full site history, the navigation model, tells me who wrote what within it, what the latest documents are within there. This is grounded in the Kaizen graph, and it knows as much as I have access to within the Microsoft Graph Search. What that means is that, for example, if I have a document stored in my OneDrive or a SharePoint site, if I want to ask it to integrate with Teams chats, if I want to potentially even pull from external data sources like ServiceNow or Salesforce or Dynamics, I now have the ability to surface this information through that M365 chat for Copilot experience. In this case right here, I happen to be doing it through the Edge browser because I wanted to show apples to apples with the previous, but you'll see Copilot brings itself to Edge. It brings itself to Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Teams, OneNote, Microsoft Loop. Essentially, if it's a Microsoft 365 product, chances are it has Copilot integrated with it. It does that through, again, the power of large language models. And think of these as OpenAI, ChatGPT, what have you. The Microsoft Graph with your data directly into your Microsoft 365 apps. And if you tell it to, Copilot for Microsoft 365 can also use the open internet, the web, as a source. Again, Copilot for Microsoft 365 has all of the Microsoft security and trust boundaries set up within it. So your data that your users might be leveraging within Copilot for Microsoft 365 never leaves your tenant, no matter what. Only if I tell it to as an end user will Copilot for Microsoft 365 include internet sources in the content it shares with me. And that's a great thing that we have the ability to have control over, both at the organizational level, but also at a personal level. Sometimes I want to ask Copilot something that should absolutely include internet sources because the internet knows a lot more about SharePoint Online than Kaizen's intranet perhaps might have. But there's other cases where I might want to ask Copilot about something that should only be grounded with information stored within Kaizen's graph. And we absolutely have the ability to do that. We can kind of have our cake and eat it too. We don't have to decide how we want to model that out. And again, Copilot for Microsoft 365, of course, built in Microsoft's comprehensive approach to security, primarily for Entra ID and Purview compliance through the Purview suite, privacy controls, and Microsoft's responsible AI model. With that being said, you guys get to stop hearing me talk for a few minutes. So I'm going to segue over to my partner here, Tim. Tim, I'll let you take control over the PowerPoint here, and it's all yours, sir.
All right. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. All right. So I get to talk about preparing for Copilot with M365. And so I love talking about this with our customers. And, you know, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, oh, gosh, you know, is AI bringing, you know, doing things that we couldn't previously do before with our data? And the answer is, well, not really. You could do this before, you just didn't have the time to do it. And so what Copilot is meant to do is Justin said, it's that Copilot that comes along and assists you and helps you, you know, is more efficient with its queries and its searching and does those things where you can then focus your time and effort on others. So when we're starting to talk about data that lives within your tenant, Justin really, you know, kind of laid that out, you know, which of these tool sets are going to be looking at data within your tenant. And so that's what I want to drill into. And so as we help you to prepare for that, really the first challenge in preparing for AI is understanding your data landscape. So what this really means is really starting to understand where your data exists, what type of data you have across your environment, first and foremost. So because if you don't know what you have, Copilot may surface some things, and I'll show you some examples of this in a little bit. And it may surprise you with what it finds, because you may have been able to find it. You just didn't know where to look, or you didn't have the right search terms, or you may not have really just had time to focus on that. But as Copilot starts engaging for you and doing these searches, it's going to find things that you didn't know were previously there. So what you'll want to do is as Justin talked about with the Purview tool set, what Microsoft really wants you to do is, prior to really getting in and surfacing some of this data, is understanding your data landscape. So really knowing what data you have. So whether you're in, an organization that's going to generate a lot of PII or a lot of HIPAA information or PCI information or intellectual property or trade secrets or any of those things. Know where the data is, know what you have and know where it is so that we can put the proper protections and controls around that so that the AI model does not surface some of this if folks don't need to, have a surprising moment of surfacing up something that they really should not have access to. So we're going to kind of drill through each of these and kind of how this helps to you can prepare your organization so that you're going to have very efficient queries, and you're going to have the assurances that you're not going to surface up data that really should not come up in the model. So preparing the data. So one of the things that we help our customers with is really helping to go through and assess, where is the data? Is it on-prem? Is it in your tenant? Is it in external data sources? What's going to help build an intelligent model so that when we start pulling data in from all these sources, that we're going to have something that is effective for us. If we're going to pull in, only a partial portion of the data that we're going to target, we don't really have a complete picture of the story that we're trying to tell. And so we want to make sure that we know where our data is and try to work towards getting that data really within our tenants' reaches so that we can have very effective and queries as Copilot begins to work for us in helping us to build some of those and assist us with some of those queries. It's important to know where the data resides because a lot of times we think of, when we start talking about data and containers of data where it lives, we may have to implement certain protection policies around that data. We may not want Copilot to surface some of this data because of the level of information that it contains. Also, another one is cleaning up your data. We've done several demos for this and had some customers where data comes up and it's like 15-year-old data. And so Copilot pulls, it went and asked and it started surfacing things up, but the data was relevant because it was there. It still existed. It was, frankly, had never been cleaned up or removed. So one of the things that you're going to want to do is really go through a data lifecycle exercise and determine, do we really need to keep all this data within our, in this file share, or in this SharePoint site, or in this Teams chat? Do we need all these conversations? Are they relevant? And then again, lastly, we want to make sure that we have the integrity of the data. So just even without Copilot, do we know what's happening with that data as it traverses through our tenant, even outside of our tenant? So again, with Copilot, we want to make sure that the data that's being surfaced and discovered and getting injected into your LLM model is going to be the data that we want to build that experience around. So organizing your data, again, we talked about getting those repositories in. So as you begin this move to the cloud and getting into, M365 solutions such as SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, we want to make sure that we try to get data organized, because data that's just sitting all over the place, it's very hard to discover, identify, and understand what its usefulness is in the organization. So getting that data organized is still very important. Are you letting your users store data on endpoint devices? And again, so we talked about the Windows 11 Copilot and picking up some information. Should some of that information be there, or should it be stored up in the central repositories? A lot of customers have third-party cloud repositories that we may want to hook connectors in so that we can apply those data governance policies to, in case we're querying a repository that may have some information that we really just need some very specific things, and make sure that we have the proper controls in place to keep some of that data from surface. But we want to make sure that our users enjoy the Copilot experience and are successful with it. And that's why we need to, to go through this exercise of getting the data organized so that it's ready and relevant for Copilot to work with. So again, I talked about this video. Cleaning up your data is so important. I mean, I almost always, when I go into a customer's environment and we're looking at email or Teams messages or SharePoint or file service, everything is kept forever. And so really that's kind of it's going to impact us as we move into Copilot, because of the data that we're going to surface, but also, that it exposes you to things like, just e-discoveries and things of that nature. So as part of this exercise and getting ready for AI, take the opportunity to go through and implement some data lifecycle or regulatory file controls about cleaning up some of this data. So it will definitely make Copilot more effective in having relevant data that's actually meaningful. And, because again, we're not always going back to some of that information because again, it's there for historical and archival purposes, but not really readily is some of the things that we may be doing, in more real time. So again, I want to make this point very, very key. Copilot will only be as successful as the data that it has access to. So, and Justin may touch on that a little bit more and some of his follow-up, but the data here is key to a successful Copilot effort within your organization. All right, here's just an example of a quick, easy way within your tenant to clean up some of your data. So this is what we call data lifecycle management within Purview. And here's one of the things that I recommend customers start with is a real simple, easy way to kind of clean up some things is around Teams chats. So this is a way we can set a policy here within Purview to clean this data out so that, again, this information that is not relevant after the policy period that we set is removed. So again, it just helps us to be more effective in our searches and creating that. But that's just one example. You can see here through the list of many of the different types of data lifecycle cleanups that you can do within your tenant. So again, another component of this is around making sure that the data that we're working with, we don't want to be surfacing things that, let's say we go and run a query for, what are the salaries of X employees, and maybe stumble upon a document that may already be there, but we were able to find that more efficient. So again, that's where coming in and knowing where the data is and labeling the data. When we talk about labeling, labeling is a way of classifying data, also a way for laying down what we call information rights management and putting protections to say, this group of people cannot see this, putting a file level, think of it almost like a file level permission at the metadata level to say what could be done. That can't print, can't forward, can't view, can't edit, can't change. All those types of things really will help us to make sure that some of that doesn't come up. Or if data does come up, that it does have a valid, this contains, privacy information. This contains, PII information, or this may contain payment card information, or any of those types of things. So by turning that on and going through that exercise, we are going to, one, benefit the organization from not surfacing things, but two, we also improve your posture around data leak prevention and things of that nature. So again, just think of this journey to AI as doing the due diligence of getting that data estate in a position where it is ready to be transformative and ready for Copilot. So Microsoft is also, this is really exciting. This is something that they just announced at Ignite, is this new tool inside of Purview, this what they call an AI hub. And what it's meant to do, this is in private preview now, so it's something that's going to be coming. But what it's meant to do is to help customers understand what are the risks of using AI within your environment. And so, it's going to go through and automatically do a data discovery and look for the risks, based off of some of the pre-built models within Purview. So I really like this because I think it answers some of the questions that we get asked a lot is, how do I know what may come up? Well, this will kind of assist you in helping to see, give you that aggregated view of what users are doing and what the risk levels are with some of the queries and things that they are doing. So this is something that's coming. Again, it's in private preview now. It's something we should see come into more general availability as time moves on. But Microsoft has heard the message loud and clear around this and is providing some new insights to help customers prepare for this. Just an example, another thing that they're going to be doing here is around providing sensitive information, AI prompts and responses. So today, if you use Purview, you're getting tooltips, things of that nature around the classification or sensitivity of an item. And so now when we're querying Copilot, we're also going to get these various prompts and responses around, hey, this information, this contains this, and allows a user when this information is surfaced to be good stewards of, yeah, our policy is I should not, and so therefore to not include some of this information because of the sense, or to automatically, whatever you use this in, it automatically is going to apply that label to the content that you are working towards creating. So again, some exciting things that are coming forward in the Microsoft tool set. So one of the things I want to just kind of briefly hit on here, again, we talked about some of these things that are in private preview, the AI hub that I just illustrated to you. Also, that are some things that are generally availability is citing the sensitivity labels. So if you have labels within an organization already, Copilot is going to be aware of those and surface those and be able to generate and inherit those sensitivity labels for content that you build. And again, some more things coming in public preview as well around protecting data that is copy and pasted or uploaded, from other consumer-generated AI sources. So if you're crossing over, as Justin mentioned earlier, from the private, edge experience over into, the M365, the Copilot for M365, you'll see that interaction where it'll come up and say, hey, it can prevent that. So anyway, just a lot of investments that are coming up. Again, you just need, for all these, you just need a E3 or E5. Again, the difference between E3 is more of the manual process. E5 is more the automated pieces to that labeling and discovering of the data. So just wanted to illustrate that for everyone. And I believe that takes it to the end of my section there, Justin. So I'm going to hand back off to you. You're on mute.
Throw $1 in the talking on mute jar, and do that in the webinar too. That should be $10, I think. But yeah, thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that overview. I think big takeaway from what I hope everyone heard from Tim is that the data is what matters for Copilot. The good news is if you're lucky enough to be in an organization where you've already begun implementing retention policies, information protection labels, what have you, that's not an investment we have to redo to get into Copilot. That being said, if you haven't started down that journey yet, maybe you're starting to dabble into Copilot waters, now is the perfect time to start laying out your roadmap for exactly what that data sensitivity might look like. But also on the same hand, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to wait to have every single document 100% labeled across the organization, because that might be decades from now, right? There's ways we can begin leveraging Copilot from Microsoft 365 today to unleash employees' productivity, to up-level their skills, to unleash that creativity without necessarily having to wait for that. But of course, we want to make sure that we're going about a reasonable deployment mechanism that's right for your organization, right? That's one of the ways where Kaizen and your Microsoft team could absolutely look to try to help figure out what the right deployment skill set might be for Copilot, because it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. There's certain lower risk or higher risk scenarios that we might be able to undergo. So now that we know what Copilot is, now that we know why we want Copilot, now that we know some of the data preparation activities that we should be looking for Copilot from Microsoft 365, let's talk about exactly what this looks like now that we've kind of gotten all these pieces laid out. When it comes to deploying Copilot, and this is, again, kind of a little bit specific to Copilot from Microsoft 365, but really all of the Microsoft Copilots that you saw in that previous few slides ago, we leverage a very similar deployment methodology for all of them, because the good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we dabble in a new Copilot. Simply put, one of the first things that we do whenever we're looking at deploying Copilot is we want to, first of all, do what we generically refer to as persona identification. Who and why are we trying to give users this tool? In some cases, that might be a specific department, right? A classic example that we all like to use is, if we're in the recruiting department, if we're in the hiring department here at Kaizen, we can use Copilot to, for example, write job descriptions, write offer letters. We can use it as a part of the interview process to pull questions to say, hey, I need to see if this individual actually knows about Azure. What are 5 questions I should ask someone that has experience with Azure to make sure that that they actually know what the resume claims that they know, whatever it might look like, right? So essentially, we tend to start with looking for specific business units or roles that we want to enable with this Copilot journey. And the whole reason for that is, candidly, Copilot's an amazing tool in the toolbox. We typically don't recommend turning it on for everyone in the organization at once, because that's a great way to have a few thousand very confused individuals all asking, what the heck is this new thing popping up in my Teams, on my Outlook, on my PowerPoint? We need to make sure that we're deploying in a strategic manner. Within that business unit, the other major items that we look at seeing is really trying to figure out who exactly is going to be able within that business unit to help us to execute that deployment, right? That might require champions that are folks that can help, get others excited about it. That might include technical readiness. That might include, just subject matter experts that know how the sausage is made within this department. They can help us really figure out exactly what those use cases might be for Copilot. Once we've figured out the who and the where, what we then tend to do is to hop towards the data preparation phase that Tim just referenced. Again, we don't want to have it be one size fits all. The risks of potential data oversharing, if someone's stumbling on a Teams chat from 15 years ago, are going to be very different depending on the user's role within the organization, as well as candidly, if there's any specific adoption that we can provide them on how to perhaps better interact with Copilot. And what I mean by that is, for example, if I were to just ask Kaizen's Copilot today, what's Kaizen's employee handbook on dress code? It might pull any one of 5 different employee handbooks that I, as an almost 20-year tenured employee at Kaizen, have sitting inside of my OneDrive or my SharePoint sites or my Exchange and blocks or what have you. But if we teach our users to ground it and to ask Copilot instead of what's Kaizen's dress code, but instead to say, according to Kaizen's employee handbook, what's Kaizen's dress code, it knows it's going to pull the latest, greatest data from the latest employee handbook file that is up on our human resources site, just as an example, right? So because of that, we essentially have the ability to figure out those exact data preparation requirements where, again, we don't necessarily have to label all data on day one. We can absolutely look to start building out a proper data preparation phase specific for those use cases, while also, of course, laying out that larger roadmap. One of the things to keep in mind as it relates to Copilot, and this is very much in the technical weeds, but I feel like it's worth calling out because a lot of folks have probably seen a lot of announcements about this. There's a new Teams client. There's a new Outlook client. Copilot from Microsoft 365 is going to require, if you want to use it from a full Teams experience perspective, the new Teams client, which I think most folks saw is already generally available and will become the standard Teams client sometime in early 2024. Last I saw, I think it was March or April. It also works best in the new Outlook client. If you don't have plans to get those enabled within your organization, at least again for those Copilot user groups, we want to probably begin planning for it sooner rather than later. Likewise, if you have versions of Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise floating around on LTSC or LTSB, these aren't going to work in Copilot either. We really need to get your users into a fairly modern release ring as of today that would require either monthly or monthly for enterprise. Going into early 2024, we'll start seeing that being picked up in quarterly updates, but we do want to typically have consideration for that. And similarly, if we're deploying Copilot for organizations, we typically always recommend making sure that, just like when we deploy Viva Connections or Viva Engage or ServiceNow integrates with Microsoft Teams, we should make users hunt for inside of Teams. We can pre-install it. We can pre-configure it, for example, on users' left-hand rails within our Teams client to give them very easy access to it. Just as, and perhaps not more important than the endpoint preparation, is that user training and enablement. For those of us that have been playing around with large language models for a few years, this might feel like basics, but a lot of folks just are going to need some coaching on how to interact with Copilot, for example. It's not like a search box inside of google.com where you just type in, turkey recipes and it gives you back 5,000 items, right? I've heard folks describe it as when you're talking to Copilot, think that you're talking to an intern, right? Give it way more context than you think you need to know. Don't ask it about SharePoint. Say, hey, on this site in the past 5 years, can you pull for me all Kaizen pro quals that happen to have consultants that have worked in SharePoint 2016 upgrades? You're going to get a much more comprehensive result set, writing perhaps a sentence to Copilot than just typing in SharePoint resumes, which who knows what the heck Copilot would return if we treat Copilot with like just a plain old search engine, right? So we need comms, we need training, but even more importantly, we also need champions. We need folks that are going to help us be able to spread use cases for Copilot. Hey, here's what I thought was awesome. Help us get colleagues excited about it, but likewise to also assist us in that training so we don't have the poor service desk answering 500 phone calls a day about why did Copilot tell me the wrong answer to something. Minor details here. Once you get all of your ducks in a row, you've got your data cleaned up, you've got your user enabled, they know what's coming. This is the easiest option. Give the user that Copilot from Microsoft 365 license. You can generally expect once you assign that license, though, it's going to take users 2 to 3 business days for them to be able to begin leveraging Copilot, because behind the scenes, Copilot has to begin ingesting all of that user's graph information within that Copilot semantic index. So they'll plan on turning this on Monday at 3 and having folks start using Monday at 4. It's going to be a few days out. Probably most important as a part of this whole deployment process is listening. What we mean is that when we first deploy Copilot, in many cases, we think we know exactly what the HR department is going to use it for. We've trained them on how to use Copilot for job descriptions. They're going to find 25 use cases for it within a few weeks that we didn't even know existed. Similarly, they're going to stumble on challenges that we didn't even think that they're going to stumble on. We want to make sure that in most cases we have what's referred to as a center of excellence model, where folks can go in, ask questions, get support not only from one another, but also from those of us in IT, from partners, what have you. What the idea being is we can continually refine what our Copilot deployment looks like, how it works, when it works, our training with it, but even better, as we begin picking up on use cases within one business department, we can absolutely look to begin expanding those use cases across the organization in other manners. So what does all of this mean? Well, first of all, we at Kaizen, we've been a Microsoft partner for well over 30 years. We've got nearly a dozen specializations and advanced specializations and all the things that Microsoft asks for us as partners to do. The reason I share this is because Kaizen is uniquely situated, I believe, to help you figure out what your Copilot journey might look like as your next major step. And for those of us that are in this webinar live, again, thank you all so much for your time. You'll be getting a survey in the next probably 2 or 3 hours, just asking one for feedback. If you hated the way Tim and I did this presentation, let us know, right? We don't get better if we don't learn that. Hopefully that's not the case, but again, we want to know. But also more importantly, let us know how we can help you out in your Copilot journey. And what I mean by that is we can absolutely come in. Let's say, for example, you're like, this is really exciting stuff, but I'm not the right person here to be really getting excited about this. Can you perhaps help me dive deeper into this? Show me some real life demos of Copilot. Let's start, demoing this, but I also want to bring in some additional stakeholders. We can absolutely do a Copilot briefing, whether it's in the Microsoft Office, whether it's in your location, whether it's they're just good old-fashioned Microsoft Teams because everyone's getting ready to start disappearing for the holidays in a few weeks here. We want to be able to enable you in doing that. Similarly, if you're leaving this call and you're thinking this is amazing, I need to know exactly what my next steps might be, let us know. We can help out with the Copilot workshop, a readiness assessment that will help us figure out not only the technical blockers that we might have around, whether it be purview or data cleanup or license management or Teams usage or whatever it might be, but also to essentially build out that full roadmap, not only from a technical perspective, but also from an adoption perspective. And if you happen to be on this call or lucky enough to have access to Copilot from Microsoft 365 already, but you just feel like you need a little bit extra to help get it over the edge, again, let us know. We're happy to help out with anything from getting the licenses sorted out, doing adoption, providing training, doing that champion management, assisting with your security or compliance or your M365 app servicing room. Literally, if you name it, if you saw it in these previous 35 slides or so, we want to be there to help you do it. And we want to work alongside you and your Microsoft team to assist in that. Man, Tim, we did good. We said it was going to be 45 minutes. We're creeping right at 44 and a half minutes. So again,
We did.
yeah, not well done. Well, thank you, Tim, for joining us. Thank you guys as attendees so much for joining us as well. I really do appreciate your all's time. I hope this was valuable. Again, please reach out. Let us know if you have questions, comments, concerns, whatever it might be. We want to help you all through this Copilot journey as best as possible. And Tim and I will be hanging out in here. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to check them up in that QA panel up at the top of your Teams client. We will be happy to help answer those. But likewise, enjoy the 14 minutes before we sneak off into our next phone calls here and for back-to-back meetings, all right? Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it again.